Man, I feel encouraged. I didn't know I was as much like Wycliffe as I am. Our boys certainly would qualify for his Bible boys, I'll tell you for sure. Now we're going to talk about the old Jack Hyles, the one that's just about to pass off the scene, on his last leg, stumbling down toward the finish line. And Mrs. Colston is going to come and talk to us for a few minutes. Miss Colston. She's going to talk on Jack Hyles, the old Jack Hyles, the boss. Miss Colston has worked for me on my staff 34 years. And I want to say this too. The tiredest person in this room right now is standing right over here. Probably the person most responsible for more work in pastor school than any other single person. I'm almost ashamed to ask her how much sleep she's had in the last week. But you owe more to her than you'll ever realize that you owe. And she has worked with me. She's been my organist all these years. She's been on our church staff, our music coordinator all these years. She's been in staff meetings and pastor school meetings, and she conducts my wedding rehearsals. And every time I get married, she conducts a rehearsal for me. And she conducts all the wedding rehearsals, and she's in charge of all of that. And probably, though we're never, I guess we never have a personal conversation. It's on the telephone. But she observes, and she knows Jack Hyles, the boss. And she's going to talk to you about it.
Mobility. You weren't listening. Got to move around. Got to keep your attention. This is exciting. How many of you are employed at your church and your preacher's your boss? Raise your hand. Look over at your preacher and tell him he's the best boss in the world. Hurry. Go ahead, the rest of you. Get with it. Testing. Good. I would ask how many of you men live with your boss at home, but I won't. Well, you're awake. That's good. That's exciting. Okay. Let me check my time. And how much is that plus 30? Okay. I better write it down or know what I'm doing. Good. Brother Hyles became my pastor 35 years, 6 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days ago. I was only 2. I can lie too. I was 4. About a year or 2 later, officially, he became my boss. But I've never sacrificed having a pastor. That's the first thing I want to tell you. I've never had to choose between having a boss or a pastor. He's been both. And my wonderful husband has worked here, I think it's in a 30-something year, 31st perhaps. And we have the greatest boss, the greatest pastor and friend in the world. A boss defined, I read it, is a master, employer, one in charge, one who supervises, one who browbeats another. Not mine. I'm going to define my boss. The one who works harder than any of us. The one who leads by example. The one who oversees every detail. Every detail. The suit I'm wearing, the suit that's the suit for the ladies today. These vests the girls wore to come and give you the books this morning. Did you see those vests? King James Bible on the front, King James Bible on the... I'm telling you, we tried 5 different solutions and 5 different companies to make those letters and make it match the braid on it. And you say, well, he just sent you shopping. No. I went shopping, that's true. And I worked with businesses and I brought back samples and we chose every detail, every single detail. And he leads by example and oversees every detail, not to find flaws. He doesn't oversee things to see where he can fuss at us or scold us, but to help us find the best way to do God's work better. and to do all we can for Jesus. When my boss hired me, and when my boss hired any of us, he took more than 50% of the responsibility for our success. My boss doesn't look at an employee and say, "Oh, am I sorry I hired you? Out with you." No, he says in his mind, this is the way he thinks: you may not be what you ought to be, but I chose you, so I have part of this responsibility. I made the decision. Now, maybe I made a poor decision, but I made the decision. And so if I hired you, I'm going to help you succeed. And so never one time in all these 35 years have I thought a scolding was to hurt me. I thought a scolding or a correction was to help me do the work better. It is never, ever a personal attack. It is always helping the work be done correctly, be done better, and so forth. Brother Hyles does not like to scold. That's the thing he hates the most. If he has to scold someone, it's just such a pain and a strain for him. Oh, he will. He'll throw a fit if he has to, but I hope he doesn't ever have to for me. He doesn't like to scold. He loves to train, to encourage, to lead, to help the follower grow, and he loves to trust an employee with a responsibility. I remember the first time Brother Hyles gave me something hard to do. I mean a challenge, not just file these, type these, prepare a song. I mean something tricky, something that took some, you call it guts, something that took something out of my heart and made me have to be courageous. It was many years ago. He wanted to buy a piece of furniture for someone, and he said, "Elaine, here's the money. I want to do something for somebody. I want you to go pick it out and have it delivered this afternoon at 4 o'clock. So I went to the furniture store, and I made my selection, and the first clerk said, "We'll have one made for you. It'll be ready in 6 weeks." Now, is 6 weeks when I'm supposed to have this ready? What time? What day? Day. I said, "That won't do." I said, "You have to understand, I'm doing this for my boss, and I'm going to buy it today." "Oh, we can't do that." I said, "May I see the manager, please?" Manager came down, and he said, "May I help you?" And I explained who I was and what I wanted. He said, "We'd be glad to sell it to you." That's why he's the manager, and the other kid punches a time card. So I said, "Now, it's going to be delivered this afternoon by 4 o'clock. "Oh," he said, "now there is a problem. We have delivery service on certain days of the week, and we can't do it this afternoon." And I said, "Thank you, I'll purchase it elsewhere." "Oh, well, maybe we could." "Can you?" And I wanted it at that address at a certain time. I drove my car to that house at 4:45. I was going to make sure that truck was pulling up, or I was breezing right back to that address. He pulled up about 5:45, and I was there to greet him and thank him. About 10 after 4, I was back at, I don't remember, office or home or somewhere, and my phone rang. Who's on the phone? It's preacher. He said, "Elaine, how you doing?" I said, "Fine." He said, "Do you need any help with your project for today?" I said, "It's done." He said, "Good girl." And that was the first of about 10,422,000 project. Now, my job was not on the line. He hired me. I'm his employee. But he's helping me grow and learn to take responsibility for him. Is Brother Hyles hard to work for? Oh, supposed to end a sentence with a preposition. Not that you know. Okay. Is Brother Hyles hard to work for? No. It's very hard to loaf for. Next thing I'm going to tell you. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. And of course, when I started working, I was really just a young mommy with very little children. I've never had to choose between being a good employee and a good wife and mother. Never once. The choice has never had to be there. I've never been forced to have to choose. It's just been wonderful. I've always chosen to work part-time. I now have 5 part-time jobs, but I've always chosen to work part-time. But I was always there when my kids came home from school. And there is a way to hire your people so that this can work. You don't have to hire people and then have 5 broken homes as a result. Mabel Boardway, who sits right here in the choir, wife of our choir director, has typed Brother Hyles letters for many, many years, way over 2 decades. The equipment's all set up at home. She types at home, and she's a fabulous wife and mommy. But she's also a tremendous help to Brother Hyles. All my jobs are part-time. My schedule's mine. I can work any time of the day or night just so I get everything done. That's a challenge. You might try that sometime. Brother Hyles is a solution-oriented boss. He finds a solution. He doesn't just scold. He finds a solution. In all these many years of working together and so forth, I can hear him say how to do something. Now, this will do this first, second. He's organized in his thinking. Let me give you an example. One time, I've always been just like I am now. Oh, some pounds less, but that's none of your business. Okay, but I'm the same person I was when I was a teenager and organizing my own friends into singing groups and programs and things. Anyway, so I've always been a busy girl and working hard in church and so forth. One of our assistant pastors here came to my husband and said, "Is your wife mad at me?" Well, who cares, you know? I mean, but he said, "Is your wife mad at me?" And Johnny said, "Oh, of course not. She and I both respect you tremendously. We're glad we're on the same team together." He said, "Well, I was back there in the back of the church auditorium Sunday morning and crossed her path, and she didn't even speak." Well, it caused a little problem, and so I thought, now what can I do? You know, Brother Hyles wants the prelude played 10 minutes before the service. I got to practice with people. I got to be everywhere, do everything. I can't stop and make you feel good, make you feel good, make you feel, are you happy now I'm speaking to you? You know. And so I went to Brother Hyles and I said, "Preacher, what can I do? I don't want to, I love to be friendly. I love people. And if any of you know me well, I'm not shy. I mean, I was born talking. And that's for your sake. And Brother Hyles came up with a plan. Now, it's not found in Hezekiah 4:3 or any other reference like that. He thinks. That's not a book in the Bible. Are you awake? I have a super idea. Stand up, everybody. Stretch. Now sit down. There. You're welcome. Okay, that was finding a solution. That guy back there was asleep. Now he can sleep standing up. That's amazing. Okay. That's finding a solution. I saw the problem. I made a solution. I didn't finish my talk and go out and say, "Boy, they're tired." You know, got your blood moving there. Okay, now Brother Hyles is a solution boss. You may be seated now, please. Thank you very much. Pull his coattail down. There, thank you. Okay. Okay, so I wasn't friendly enough, and so Brother Hyles said, "I have a solution." He said, "Elaine, I know you're very, very busy." And now, analyze what he did, or think, I'm analyzing it, you think with me. He said, "I know that between the organ and the back door," this happened when our auditorium was this size. We had a wall right here, and this was a semicircular choir, and the pulpit was about right here, and this was our center aisle when we had this much. And he said, "Elaine, I know that from right here at the organ, which was there, and the piano was here, it's you're in a hurry to get to your office." He said, "Now I want you to make a plan. I want you to speak to 5 people between here and there." And I said, and talk a long time? He said, "No, you kind of talk while walking, but look in their eyes and say, and try to call people by name when you recognize them. Or if you know a situation, 'Hey, congratulations on the new baby. That's great. Oh, how's your mother? I've been praying for her. Great. Hey, New dress, great, beautiful color. Sorry they didn't have it in your size, but no, he didn't say to do that. That's no. But that's the first thing he said to do, talk to 5 people. Now, I love people. I would love to sit around and talk and take a lot of time. But I can't. I have work to do. But I can pay attention to people. That was the first thing he told me. And the second thing he told me, and no one in our church, not even my husband, knows this statement, and no one of you will know the names. But then he gave me the names of about 20 people in the church, not troublemakers, but influential people. And he said, you know, everybody's important, but some people, if they get disgruntled, they'll affect hundreds. Some people disgruntled will keep it to themselves and not affect more than maybe themselves and a spouse. But he said, these are important people. Don't overlook anybody, but especially pay attention to these people. Well, this just took care of the problem, and that's wonderful. Okay, next idea. We have a definition of work here. It's called accomplishment. Don't look at the person now that this describes. But do you have anybody who works for you that doesn't get the job done and says, oh, I got up early and I worked so hard, and preacher, I've been at it all day. I worked at this for 4 days. I skipped meals and I did everything I could, but it's not done. You haven't worked. Brother Hyles has taught us that work is the completion, the accomplishment. And so until I've completed the work, I haven't worked, or something's not worked. And so it's very important. I'm not talking about straining yourself for hours. I'm talking about accomplishing the job. Okay, next thing about boss. We have procedures, policies, and they're very consistent and stable. That's why work is not confusing here. If a procedure or policy needs changing, it's changed very carefully. A few years ago, some of our offices needed membership offices here. All the girls that take care of our records and baptisms and everything needed overseeing more directly than Brother Hyles could give. And frankly, we had tried several different things. Nothing was working. So we had a little meeting of some of us, and preacher said, this office, these jobs need more supervision. These are good ladies who work, but they're not strong enough to solve the problems when there's no troubleshooter. What can we do? We've had different men in charge of it. It's not working. Different ladies in charge of it. It's not working. So when my preacher has a need, I try to meet it. And I said, may I do it? He said, you're crazy. Well, I already knew that. I asked my husband. Anyway, he said, you're crazy. You already have too much to do. I said, but something's wrong here. We got to find a solution. You've tried different things that last a few months or 6 months or a half a year. That's the same, isn't it? Thank you for listening. I said, let me try. I'm doing more things I just tried for 2 weeks. I'm still doing it after all these years. Anyway, I said, let me try. But now here's what I want you to know. He said, okay, but if you take this on, then something else that you're doing needs to be assigned to somebody else. I will not just let you keep on taking more and more and more and more and more work. And I want you to understand that, people. Maybe I'm workaholic, I don't know. Maybe it's just mom and daddy, and we grew up on the farm in Indiana, and we just always worked hard and believed it was important to use your time wisely and get a lot done. And so, but you don't take advantage of a workaholic. One time I was overdoing, and this is another point, and I was probably way beyond my load limit, work-wise. And oh dear, let's pass on that point. Anyway, the insane asylum around here is in a town called Westville, and so you'll understand the meaning of the word Westville in my sentence here. I was doing too much, and I was figuring out with Brother Hyles what I could do, and I said, but the work is so important, and you have so much that needs to be done, and I can do it. And he said, you better take care of yourself. He said, you won't be any help to the work if you're working out of Westville. And he's right. And so I've learned to schedule my time better and and balance it. And again, he's good. Okay, here's another boss thing. I'm remembering a time when a man who had been an associate pastor here for quite a few years resigned to go into full-time evangelism, I think. And we were all very concerned. Our staff was small at the time, and we thought, what do we do without him? Here's what Brother Hyles did. He hired 2 people not to take that man's place. And I quote what I learned that day in that little staff meeting up in the Sunday school classroom in the Miller Hall. He said, no one can take his place in your hearts, but the duties must be reassigned. That has taken me over so many humps all these years. You don't work any place or live any place for 36 years without ups and downs, people coming and going, battles and victories and so forth. And so when Brother Hyles said, no one can take his place in your heart, but the duties must be reassigned, that took care of it. When a man named Jim Salee, how many of you know the name Salee? Wonderful memories of a great man who was the head of our music department at the college. God took him home to heaven off of Highway 41, right where that bridge goes between Highland and Schererville. And we all thought we'd just die. Anyway, after Jim Salee's funeral, I was assigned to teach 3 of his college classes. And that day I walked in to teach those college students music theory. They did not want to see me or anyone else. And I said, I'm not here to take his place in your hearts, but the work must be reassigned. And then we went on, and we got the job done. It's a good philosophy. Okay, as your staff increases, it brings on some changes. And that's when you get older and you stay someplace a long time. It's bound to happen. We used to have the staff names on our church letterhead. How many of you do? Because you always copy us. Whatever we do, you copy. We don't have ours. Okay. We used to have our staff names on our letterhead, all of us, secretaries, assistant pastors. Nice little section across the top, 6 or 8 of us. Now, if we did that, it would take pages and pages. We wouldn't have room to write the letter. When our staff was little, we used to have a birthday party for each of us. The whole staff. I remember I'd have them over to my house or over to preacher's secretary's house or over to pastor's house, and we'd have a birthday party for all of us. Now we would get to party several times a day all year long. Hey, that's a good idea. He treated the staff to a cruise when our staff was small. About 10 of us couples went out for, I think about a 9-day cruise to the Bahamas. Our preacher is unselfish. I remember the cruise. He told everybody on the cruise now, he said to us, now when you're in the Bahamas, you ought to buy a conversation piece. My husband said I married one. He values each staff member for what he or she is, and believe me, we're very different from each other. I'm thinking right now about a lady named Judy Anderson. How many of you do know Judy Anderson? If she walked in right now, you'd know who she is. Okay. How many of you knew Elaine Colston before I was introduced this morning? Good night. So I'm more important than Judy Anderson? No. I'm louder. I mean, Brother Hyles says that everybody has about 20,000 words in their vocabulary, and he said, I've used all mine up already. Judy Anderson probably says one sentence to every 10,348 of mine. And I'm always busy and outgoing, and Judy stays in one office, does her job. No, I'm not more important than she is. She doesn't talk and giggle. I walk by and I say, hi, how you doing? Hey, nice tie. You know, and she says, hello. But she pays the bills around here. And she's very, very, very adamant about you don't go a cent over the budget and you don't spend it unless you have it, and pays the bills on time. And she's the reason. Brother Hyles pulled a pie pan out of our pulpit the other day and lit a fire to our mortgage, and we're debt free. And he called her down from the balcony to be honored. Now, everybody's important, and we're not looking for duplicates. of personalities, every individual. He assigns duties, trains how it's to be done, and then depends on the employee. And no one does anyone else's work. I'm quoting Brother Hyles. You do your work. If you have time left at the end of the day to read Christian Womanhood for an hour, you don't do her work. Here is why the boss requires that. If this lady doesn't have enough to do, and so this lady has too much to do, well, shouldn't we be nice? No, because probably she's behind for other reasons in this work. But anyway, if she has nothing to do and she starts helping her every afternoon, you know what we've just created? Another job. Because one of these days she's going to be too busy to help her. Then this one's going to be upset. And when two women get upset, it's more than you want to see, man. It's horrible. Next, Brother Hyles always knows what's going on, and he keeps up with everything, and basically he approves or vetoes. Now, this is one way he bossed me at a time when I needed to learn something. I thought I was being very obedient as an employee, so I needed a new children's choir director, so I go in for my appointment and I say, who do you think? Who would be a good choice? Let's try it that way. And he said, give me some names. And I said, well, preacher, you know best, you're wise. I want the person you want. He said, but I don't want to do your homework for you. Okay. So he said, you think, you pray about it, you consider people, don't talk to them. Never, 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 never. What did I just say? Okay. Never, never, never go to someone and ask them to be a certain position or do something unless you've gotten the name approved first. Don't even say, I'm considering asking you, but I have to go ask Brother Hyles first. That's rotten as the devil, because if the person thinks he's vetoed because preacher vetoed, he'll probably take his family and go to some dead, dry, dusty church, and you've ruined the future of his children. But anyway, so you never give a name, talk to the person first. But he said, if you'll give the names to me, then I can approve or veto, but you do the thinking. I'm not going to do your homework for you. I remember the first time I made a mistake. It was about 2 days ago, I think. No. I was just crushed. I'm a very diligent, hardworking person, and I blew it. I mean, I just didn't do something well enough or correct. And I know men don't like to see women cry and all that stuff, but my eyes were filled with tears, and I was just so upset, and I just said, preacher, I've failed you. Praise God, I have a sensible preacher boss. He said, I knew when I hired you, you weren't perfect. And so I already figured that somewhere along the line you would make some mistakes and disappoint me. So it's okay, just what it's no problem. We can go on from here. And then another time, it just seemed like, why? I'm trying so hard to do everything right, and why can't I do it right? And he said, hey, there are hundreds of people in the audience that I don't scold or talk to on a regular basis. You heard Brother Hyles say, many of our people have never shaken his hand, never had a personal conversation. And I've had hundreds of thousands, of course. And he said, but that's because we work. If a car is in the showroom, it is beautiful and shining. The gears, there's no friction, no tire against the pavement. But if it's going somewhere, you're going to have some problems, some splashed up mud puddles and so forth. And so he said, I understand that. Very, very important. He scolds according to how it's taken. How many of you here have more than one child? You're a parent, yeah. Okay, you probably have one child that all you have to do is just Tanya. And the child is penitent, checks himself into Alcatraz for his unworthy crime. And all you've done is go, then you have another kid. You take away his allowance, ground him for 2 weeks, spank him, send him to bed without supper, and he says, were you talking to me? You need to do your discipline or guidance like my boss does. I have one particular kind of shampoo that's called balancing shampoo. And if your hair is very, 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 very dirty and it's full of hairspray and you've been working out near a building and there's sawdust in it and so forth, the shampoo will release chemical reactions that really cleans it thoroughly and really works on every strand. But if your hair is quite clean and you're just washing again for a daily shampoo, it doesn't do that much. It doesn't attack the fibers or the strands of the hair so greatly. And that's the way my boss is. If you've made a mistake and you know it's a mistake and you're upset about it yourself and you just could die because you did it, you're going to correct it, you're learning from it, hey, you're already scolding yourself. He doesn't have to bother. But if you haven't caught on that you're a slob and your work is sloppy and you're not accomplishing anything and your 8-hour day is sort of crushed into an hour and a half of real work, then he's got to do more than that. When our staff was young and most of us had elementary age children or little, Preacher had a PK club for the staff members' kids, Preacher's kids, and we had a wonderful time. I think I heard Brother Ray Young in his talk yesterday mention Christmas gifts, so I'm trying not to be repetitive of what anyone else has said and trying to give you new things. But Brother Hyles is very generous to all of us. He lives Christmas 365 days a year. But at Christmas, he's very thoughtful. And this Christmas, for example, there was a nice note that Brother and Mrs. Hyles were giving to each of us gift certificate to a very lovely restaurant, and very nice things are done for us. When I think of the wisdom with which he bosses me, I would describe it as pure, peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy, good fruit, without partiality, without hypocrisy. One last sentence. The old Jack Hyles is a lot like the young Jack Hyles because he's had plenty of practice, perseverance. He just keeps on going, and I'm so thankful to work with him.
Thank you.
We have, I think now, 12 people who've worked here 30 years or more. We have over 50 who've been here 20 years or more. And Mrs. Colston and 2 or 3 others, Mrs. Plopper's been here 35, almost 36 years now, and I've been here almost 37. And it's a wonderful thing. I feel sorry for you fellows that have itchy feet. Grass is always greener across the... I tell you, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to grow old with the same people. It's not wonderful to grow old, but if you got to do it, it's good to grow old with the same people.
All right. What I wanted to talk to you about today is one of the last founding fathers we had. I purposely saved this man for the last because I think it would be fitting to do so. I'm going to go ahead and tell you his name right up front. His name is Thomas Jefferson. We owe a lot to Thomas Jefferson for the political freedoms, religious freedoms, and such that we have. But again, we need to talk about a little bit about the established churches and the problem there. Jefferson hated the established churches, and one of the things he wanted to be remembered for was the fact that he had worked to de-establish the churches. He also worked with the Baptists, like we said yesterday, with Madison to bring about this religious freedom. But a lot of people tend to question Jefferson and his belief in the Bible and such like that, especially secular historians, no doubt, tend to do that. As a young man, Jefferson was pretty much taught by a secular historian, and so Jefferson started studying the classics. And the secular historian told Jefferson to ignore the Bible as a young man, said that it's incomplete. Go to those classics that the heathenists taught us. And he said, learn their history. He said, because it tends to be more complete. And Jefferson, as a young man, was lured into that. But as he became an older man, he changed. And this is what Duma Malone had to say about him. later on, he found in the teachings of Jesus the purest system of morals ever before preached to man. He changed as an older man, and that's something that most secular historians will not mention. Even in his old age, though, however, he was fully convinced that the priests, Protestants and Catholics, not Baptists, had adulterated and sophisticated the teachings of Jesus for their own selfish purposes. Some would say that Jefferson would never declare himself a Christian, but if you check his writings and you see what he has to say, this is what Jefferson says. Speaking of the Bible, a more beautiful or precious morsel of ethics I have never seen. It is a document in proof that I am a real Christian. That is to say, a disciple of the doctrines of Jesus.
Dr. Jeff Owens is going to come and teach the next class. Let me ask you concerning your comfort. Are you too warm this morning? Raise your hand if you're too warm. If you're too cool, raise your hand, would you please? All right, you folks back here, I need to trade with these folks back here. And, all right. We were discussing the subjects that we thought would help you. Maybe a fellow been preaching 50 years has learned a few things that could help somebody been preaching 50 days or 5 years. And so we discussed the subjects that would help you as we analyze the ministry here. And the only person that asked for his subject right off the bat was Dr. Jeff Owens. And he said, I'd like to talk on the justice of the old Dr. Jack Hyles. Now, we call these things Jack Hyles the husband, Jack Hyles the father, Jack Hyles the boss. This one don't fit. Jack Hyles the judge, we're calling it, but that's not it, though I have judged a lot of you. But it deals with justice. It's the word that we use over and over and over again here. Dr. Evans would tell you that in our discussions about Hyles Anderson College students, the word justice is used. I'll let Dr. Owens explain it to you. This is one of the finest men I know. For 3 years, I watched him carefully, studied him carefully before I ever hired him. And he's been with us now for numbers of years. I've never been sorry. A wonderful young man, a hard-working young man, a great preacher. And he's going to talk to you about the justice of the old Jack Hyles.
All right. I am thankful that I have had the privilege of watching an older pastor make decisions. I'm amazed at how much they differ from what mine would have been. I can get awful hasty sometimes, and I want to make my decisions very quickly, and I thank God that I've had the opportunity of watching Brother Hyles make decisions. I'm going to very quickly read 3 or 4 verses to you. I don't want you to take your Bible out. Deuteronomy 1, verse 12 through 16, it says, "How can I myself alone bear your cumbrance and your burden and your strife? Take you wise men and understanding, and know among your tribes, and I will make them rulers over you." And he answered me and said, "The thing which thou hast spoken is good for us to do." So I took the chief of your tribes, wise men, and known, and made them heads over you, captains over thousands, and captains over hundreds, and captains over 50s, and captains over 10s, and officers among your tribes. And I charged your judges at that time, saying, "Hear the causes between your brethren, and judge righteously between every man and his brother, and the stranger that is with him." Brother Hyles taught us in a Bible study one night that this scripture, of course, the story here is God wanted someone to help Moses to make right decisions among the people. There were so many people, Moses needed some help. And so, judges were chosen to judge over different quantities of people based on their abilities. The big thing God wanted to see happen is that the people were judged righteously, that we were doing right by the people. God wanted Moses to be fair. Probably the thing that's made the biggest impact on my life since I came to work for Brother Hyles here is in watching his intense desire to be fair, to be just with people. It's an issue with him. He wants to be fair with everybody. Now, I believe that the greatest attribute of God is his justice. And since we're to be like Jesus, it would seem like that should be a big issue with us as well. God will not be unjust. And so, I don't know how many times I've heard Brother Hyles say this: we must do what's right in every given situation. And so, as an older pastor, he has been in most every situation known to a pastor. Therefore, he has some insight that many of us would never have because of the years of experience that he's had. And so, I'm going to give you some of the ways that I've watched him practice justice. First of all, he's taught us that we are to make our decisions in our area of jurisdiction. He said, you've got to make decisions, but make sure you make decisions in your area. In other words, not in everybody else's area. Brother Hyles says everybody has an area of jurisdiction, and we're responsible for that area, and we're to judge in that area. The reason why some of us are bad judges is we're so busy judging someone else's area, we're not busy taking care of our own. He said a teacher in our school is to judge their classroom, not somebody else's. A principal is to judge his school, not somebody else's. A father judges in his home, not in somebody else's. A pastor judges in his church, not in somebody else's. That's why we're called independent fundamental Baptists. Preacher says many of the problems that we have in our churches are the result of somebody judging in somebody else's area. There's a lot of conflict in the church, and this is where a lot of it comes from. You see, in our church staff meetings, never, since I have been here, never one time have we ever discussed another church's problems. Never. I've been in here 8 years. Brother Hyles wouldn't allow it. Why? Well, we have our own area to judge. And believe me, we got our hands full here. We don't need to worry about everybody else's problem. We've got to take care of our area. I heard Brother Hyles say this one day. He said, one of the greatest problems of humanity is that we talk about things that we cannot solve. A good example of this policy of judging in our area, taking responsibility for our area. Brother Hyles very fair with people. You know, pastors in this area, if their members came here to counsel with Brother Hyles, you know, Brother Hyles would not counsel them without a letter from that pastor giving Brother Hyles permission to do so. He's fair. He's fair with other preachers. One day I went to Brother Hyles with a problem. But there was a problem with my problem, and it was this: it wasn't in my area of responsibility. So I took it to him, and I thought I'd fix up somebody else's problems. And Brother Hyles said this. He said, "Jeff, I'll talk with that assistant pastor about his area, okay?" And I very politely said, "Okay, I got it. Keep my nose in my own business." Well, it wasn't a matter of him not wanting to deal with it. he was trying to be fair and just to that other assistant pastor. Brother Hyles guides our church and our people to be fair and just with one another. And one of the ways he accomplishes that is he tells us to make sure that we care for our area and don't spend all of our time worrying about somebody else's. Secondly, he insists that we know the truth about any given matter. He says to be just, we've got to know the truth about the matter. See, we too often are unfair in our decisions because we don't get all the facts. You cannot be fair unless you know the truth. We've got to know the truth. We've got to know the truth, and when you don't have the facts, you don't have the truth. If you don't have all the facts, you don't have all the truth. I was amazed after sitting in some staff meetings with Brother Hyles. He reminded me of a lawyer. When we'd go to work on a given subject, he'd say, when? What? Where? How? Who? Who else? How many? Why? He was always very, very thorough about collecting the facts. Why? The only way he can be a good judge or just with anybody involved is he's got to know what's going on. He's got to have all the facts. And by the way, he didn't want to know what it looked like happened. He didn't want to know what we thought happened. He didn't even necessarily just want to know what somebody said that somebody said happened. He wanted to know what actually happened. You know, preacher doesn't believe everything that everybody tells him all the time. He tells a story about how we had a layman, preacher had a layman approach him, and that layman said to Brother Hyles, my child is going to one of your schools, and my child's being mistreated. Brother Hyles said, now, how do you know your child's been mistreated? And that layman said, well, my child told me they were being mistreated. Brother Hyles said, do you believe everything your child says? And that parent said, my child always tells all the truth, all the time. And Brother Hyles said, then I guess that I should believe everything that your child told me about the way you and your wife are behaving at home right now, huh? And the man said, well, maybe we ought to just drop this subject. You know, we got to know the truth. You got to know the truth, and you got to ask questions to know the truth. You know, people don't always communicate the story correctly. Even sincere people, they just don't tell you everything. And then there are those that just flat out lie. So you got to know what's going on. We've got to know the truth, and that's something that Brother Hyles insists on around here. We've got to know the truth about a matter before we make a judgment. For instance, out at our college, when the rooms in our school are not being used, we lock them. Well, a couple of years ago, someone failed to lock a room. And as a result of it, we found a dating couple in that room. When we found them, they were doing nothing wrong. So we asked them, so what were you doing? They said, praying. Now, that's not what we called it when I was a kid. But they said they were praying. But you know something? We could not prove anything. And Brother Hyles said that we cannot assume guilt. We've got to be just. We've got to be fair. And we've got to know the facts. And although, let's face it, had it been me and my girlfriend, which is now my wife, I'd probably been kissing her in that room. But I often make my judgment based on what I would have done. I've got to make my judgment based on what actually happened. And so we've got to know the truth. Brother Hyles insists constantly. He just asks question after question after question because he's got to know the truth. Thirdly, he says once we know the truth about something, we've got to be proper in our sentencing. We've got to be proper in our sentencing. I mean, if somebody's done something wrong, now we're going to have to be careful about the way we deal with it, and we've got to deal with it appropriately. By the way, if something's been done wrong, if there's no punishment at all, that's not justice. But if there's too much punishment, that's not fair either. So we got to get this thing right. I noticed something. I've noticed three things that Brother Hyles does when it comes to the sentencing. After we know someone has done wrong, I'll show you what he does. Number one, he teaches us that our punishment should be predetermined. In other words, people ought to know in advance what's going to happen if they step over that line. You see, I think that's how God is. God said, you don't get saved, you go to hell. What's that? That's predetermined policy, if you ask me. You see, it's unfair when we try to, and actually some of us, we try to use virtually retroactive punishment. We will want to make a rule today and punish someone who broke that rule yesterday. Well, that's not fair to people. That's not right. Brother Hyles is concerned about judging right and being fair, and he's got to get the facts, and once he gets them, if we find someone is guilty, then we got to be careful about administering the discipline or the punishment. So punishment is supposed to be predetermined. And secondly, he asks us about the knowledge of the rule. He says, now, do the people know this rule? He even asks this. He says, is it our fault they did not know about this? You know, with new people constantly coming into our system, we've got to keep the rules in front of them. We could punish someone that's brand new that didn't even know the rule. Brother Hyles, you know, I'm amazed. He always looks to see if he's guilty first. Is it my fault you disobeyed? Is it my fault that happened? Did I not make the rule clear? So we ask ourselves this question. Did the student know the rule? Did the employee know that was right or wrong? Did the child know what was right or wrong? That's one reason why at our schools here we have handbooks and you're required to read them and sign a page saying you read it. That way, when you do wrong, we say, is that your signature right there? They say, it is. We say, did you break that rule? Yes, you did. In other words, obviously, you knew that you were going to get in trouble for doing that. We're not wrong for administering discipline here. That's how Brother Hyles works everything. He constantly is concerned about fairness. I said there should be a proper sentencing. I said the punishment should not be, the punishment should be predetermined. And secondly, we've got to make sure that the knowledge of the rule is out. And then number three, I maybe hear this statement as much as any. He says, we've got to consider if there's a precedence about this thing. Brother Hyles asked, well, what have we done before in this given situation? Do we have a precedence? If somebody makes a request of something from Brother Hyles, he may bring it up in a staff meeting and say, well, what have we done before? Why? He doesn't want to mistreat anybody. He wants us to be fair with one another. He even asks us to remind him of rules that we have set. He doesn't want to show favoritism. He wants one to enjoy the same privileges everybody else does. And so we're talking about making good decisions. We're talking about justice. We're talking about judging well. Number 4, Brother Hyles has taught us to be just. You're to treat people right after the sentencing's concluded. After it's over with, after they've been disciplined, Brother Hyles says you're to treat them right after there's been discipline. You see, once they've been found guilty and once punishment has been administered, then forget it. It's done. It's done. It's taken care of. The bill's paid. Now, some of us can't live that way. That's upper level Christianity. I mean, once it's done, it's done. I thank God that when I got saved, it was a done deal. All taken care of. Gone, 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 gone. Yes, my sins are gone. And they're not going to be held against me. We need to begin to think a little more like God thinks. And God is a just God. I made a real dumb mistake when I first came on staff. Pretty well been doing it on a weekly basis ever since. And Brother Hyles had corrected me about it. I was devastated. I was devastated because I let my preacher down, and I was devastated because I felt I let the Lord down. And he corrected me, and I didn't want to go to the next staff meeting. I was afraid he's going to growl at me and bark at me and everything. You know what? We walked in that staff meeting. I thought, he's having a spell. He's forgotten. He's just totally forgotten. He treated me like it had never happened. And you know, that's how it always is. He finds out the facts when if something's not right, he corrects it. After it's been corrected, he says, it's over. Let's go on. We got stuff to do around here. That's how we live here. You know, if we were as concerned about being just with someone after the punishment as we are that they get their punishment, we might be good Christians again. And number 5, to be just, Brother Hyles, he has chosen to keep the rules himself. He keeps the rules himself. He's fair. You see, the same decision that he is making that affects the rest of us, it affects him too. And we know that he's going to keep that rule, and he wants it that way. You take, for instance, at our college, there's a rule that to get into the school, you show an ID. Nobody may get into the school unless they show their ID. That's to keep our young ladies safe. But Brother Hyles, he made the rule so that it included him as well. Now, he's a preacher. He's a pastor. Now, he's in charge of everything around here, but he said, I will keep the same rule. Well, we believe in his fairness because his fairness includes him too. And if somebody's going to lose something, so is he. And if the rest of us are going to lose something or gain something, it's going to apply to him as well. He doesn't think he's above the rules. He doesn't think that it is fair for him to establish a rule that he personally would not follow. And so he follows those rules. You see, to us, his judgment is more fair that way. It might have been fair in the first place, but he makes sure that he lives what he preaches. You know, this probably seemed like a small thing, but when I first came here, there's a little parking lot out here to the side of our church. And the parking lot was a church staff parking lot. We kind of considered it that. And it was basically first come, first serve. First one there, you just park. Well, one day in the staff meeting, we got concerned about the ladies walking from across the street and things, and we thought we would all vote on making the church parking lot just for the ladies. Now, in that little parking lot, there was a parking spot that we kind of just always assumed was Brother Hyles. Doesn't have a sign on it. Nobody ever said, you can't park there, that's Brother Hyles. We just kind of assumed it, and it was his. Now, when we made this decision to make that parking lot right by the building just for ladies, not a person on our staff was giving any thought to the fact that that was about to affect Brother Hyles. We never gave any thought to it. Matter of fact, had you asked any of us, we would have thought, well, that's for everybody but Brother Hyles, and he'll continue to park right there because we love him and we want him to be right there by that door. That's how we want it. You know, I came into church the next day after we passed that rule. His church was down the street. His car was down the street. Yeah. I don't want him to move his church down the street. He's threatened to do that. We came in to the building the next day, and he had moved his car, and he was no longer parking in what we always assumed was his spot. And a little bit it irritated me, and nobody here would have ever dreamed of him doing that but him. Why? If he makes a rule, he follows it. If he makes a rule, he doesn't think he's above that rule. Number 6, he listens to the whole story before he makes a decision. He listens to the whole story before he makes a decision. Boy, that'd change some of your attitudes about life in general. Some of you wouldn't be so bitter all the time if you just stop and listen to what's being said and listen to the right people. He listens to the whole story before he makes a decision. So, to be fair, when it's a two-party situation, he always listens to both sides. He doesn't form an opinion on just one side. He wants to hear the rest of the story. Paul Harvey here, he wants to hear the rest. He makes a decision only after speaking to the people that are involved. Now, he doesn't even like to make a decision, and he won't. If there's an area in the church where a decision must be made, if a key person is not there to help make that decision, it just won't be made. He's got to have all the facts, if you remember correctly. He wants to be fair. He wants to get anybody in on that decision that needs to be in on it. You take, for instance, RA Bus Ministry here is ran by Brother Roy Moffitt. Now, if we were sitting in a staff meeting, and I've heard different situations like this happen over and over and over again. If the A Bus Ministry came up in a staff meeting and Brother Moffitt was not there, Brother Hyles would say, let's table this until Brother Moffitt is able to be here because he may know some facts that we need to make a good decision in that area. You see, Brother Hyles is willing to pay the price of however much time it takes to be just, to make the right decision. You know, even in helping people in their marriages and things, he asks that when he counsels marriages that two people come in and he deals with both the husband and the wife. Now, it's obvious to any man here where the problem was. But Brother Hyles is fair to let the woman talk for a few minutes. You know, our impatience causes us to be unjust with many people. You know, and again, let me say, I am so glad that I've had the privilege of being around an older pastor who has had so much experience about making decisions. I'm going to tell you something. I don't agree with him a lot of times. I say, what? Hey, just let me make that that decision, no problem. Let me nail the guy to the wall. Seems obvious what needs to happen here. Just move out of the way, preacher. Let me take over. He's so just and patient, and then he nails him to the wall himself. But I get in a hurry, and I say, boy, let me do that. I tell you what I'd do. What are we waiting for? Let's go. This is great. He said, but we don't have all the facts. It's got to be done right. We don't want to hurt people unnecessarily. It's got to be done right. Because he's concerned about justice. Why? Because I believe Brother Hyles wants to be like Jesus, and Jesus is concerned about justice. God's greatest attribute is justice. Are you just? To be just, I've found that Brother Hyles just rarely makes major decisions without getting some other people in on it. You know, I've watched him in groups of people ask if he felt that the other people in that group thought a decision he was about to make was just. See, Brother Hyles insists on this. He keeps telling us there's only one person that has perfect justice, or there's only one that has perfect justice. That's God. Therefore, Brother Hyles even knows he could make some wrong decisions. So I can tell you something Jack Hyles fears. There's no doubt in my mind about this. He fears hurting someone because of an injustice. He fears that. He wants to be just and fair. He loves me. He cares about me. I know that for a fact, and if you've ever tried to get close to him at all, you'd know he loves you and he wants to be fair with you, but not just fair with you, fair with everybody. And so, Brother Hyles gets some people in on his decisions. Number 8, to be just, I've watched Brother Hyles say this: we should never punish a group for a rule broken by one. We should not punish a group for a rule broken by one. You see, if one student in our grade school broke a rule, Brother Hyles would not want the teacher to take recess away from the whole class. You see, that's not fair. It's not right that everybody loses a privilege because of a broken rule. You say, well, Brother Owens, this old world is just mixed up. You're right. When we get to heaven, we're going to see what justice is all about. But I tell you, for now, we're to do the very best we can with this thing and be just and be fair. You know, Brother Hyles, to be just, I've watched him treat everybody the same. And so number 9, he tries to treat everybody the same. I'll tell you a little something that occurred here a couple of years ago. Brother Hyles decided that he wanted to give the full-time staff ladies at our college a half a day off a week so they could spend it with their families. He's a very generous man. He said, you're going to take a half day and I'm going to let you go and do with it as you please. But then he realized to be just, he was going to have to do that here at the church, and he turned around and he did it. But it didn't stop there. Once that thought, or once justice kicked in, it began to multiply. And he said, well, if they're a full-time staff lady, we're going to give them a half day off a week. But if they only work for us 4 days a week, I better break it down and be fair to them too. And so then he gave them a half day off 3 weeks out of each month. And then he said, there are people that work for us 3 days a week. Well, I'll give them a half day off 2 weeks out of each month. What was he doing? He was looking at every level and seeing how his decision affect them. He wanted to be fair. He's trying to help them. He's trying to be just. Number 10. When Brother Hyles makes a decision, he stops and thinks about everybody it will affect. He stops to think about everybody it will affect. Brother Hyles is concerned that we're treated fairly. I love working here. I've never gotten the short end of the stick. Never have. Matter of fact, I'm always treated, I feel like, more than fairly. Brother Hyles has been fair with us. He loves us. Now, I'm going to finish up here. I'm going to make a couple of statements. You know, when you see Brother Hyles preaching the Word of God behind this pulpit, he preaches with authority. And he makes no apology for what he preaches. Now, what you don't get to see is what I get to see. I get to see him leading people when he's out of the pulpit. And let me tell you something that he works at. He works very hard at being just, so he never has to apologize for hurting people by an injustice. He works as hard out of the pulpit at being just as he does in the pulpit preaching the Word of God with authority. He works very hard at it. You know, I've heard him say, I've watched him leave a staff meeting, and I've heard him mention, I hope we did the right thing. Because he wants to do right. He wants right done. We started out with a scripture where some judges were chosen, and those judges were expected to judge between the people righteously. And with these 10 things, let me repeat them for you. I said, number 1, we're to make a decision in our area of jurisdiction, not somebody else's. Number 2, we've got to know the truth about a matter. Number 3, there should be proper sentencing, including punishment that's predetermined, a good knowledge of the rules, and consider precedences. Number 4, we're to treat the guilty party right after the sentencing. Next, listen to the whole story before making a decision. Next, he keeps the rules that all of us keep. Next, he rarely makes decisions that are major on his own. Next, you should never punish a group for a rule broken by one. He treats everybody the same, and he thinks about how any decision will affect everybody that's involved. Again, there's no way in the world that we can learn everything that an old man knows from a book, but we could watch his life and watch how he makes decisions. And that's exactly what I do with Brother Hyles, and he judges justly.
Psalm 118, verses 103, 101, and Psalms 133, 1. How sweet are thy words unto my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. How sweet are thy words unto my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. I have refrained my feet from every evil way, that I might keep thy word. I have refrained my feet from every evil way, that I might keep thy word. Oh how love I thy law, it is my meditation all the day. Oh how love I thy law, it is my meditation all the day. I have refrained my feet from every evil way, that I might keep thy word. I have refrained my feet from every evil way, that I might keep thy word. Behold, how good, and behold, how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. Behold, how good, and behold, how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. Behold, how good, and behold, how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. together in unity. Behold, how good, and behold, how pleasant.
June 8th of 1824 began a 2-year-long period of immense suffering for Anne and Adoniram Judson. They had been invited by the Burmese king to set up a ministry in the capital of Burma, but shortly thereafter their arrival, a war between Great Britain and Burma broke out, and any foreigner was eyed with suspicion, including Adoniram Judson. He was sentenced to prison as a spy and was condemned to death. Every afternoon, the death drums rolled, and he never knew whether the 3 o'clock in the afternoon drum roll would be for him or for someone else. Anne kept him alive after she had bribed the jailer, and every evening she would crawl into the face of his cell and would give him tidbits of food and clothing. Whenever he could, he did all that he could to translate the Bible into the Burmese language. And days when he felt that he could not go another step, he kept praying, "Dear Lord, let me finish my work. Spare me long enough to put thy precious saving words into the hands of a perishing people." Now, how to keep all of these sheets of paper safe, however, was another problem, for the jailer was becoming more and more antagonistic and fashioned a pillow for Judson then to secretly hide all of the bits of paper. The jailer, however, one day, so angry that this pillow seemed to be growing, decided he wanted this hard pillow for himself. Anne and Adoniram thought they were at wit's end, for this pillow represented many years and many hours of toil and labor. Anne cleverly designed a beautiful pillow, brought it to the jailer, and said, wouldn't he rather have this gorgeous pillow instead of that old, worn, soiled, hard one? And he willingly made the trade. In 1850, when Adoniram Judson died at the age of 62, he had spent 38 years in Burma, a land that had had previously no testimony of the gospel of Christ. But God's word brought to Burma 63 churches, 163 missionaries, and over 7,000 baptized converts. Judson's son said at the funeral, "If you are succeeding without suffering, it's because someone suffered before you. If you are suffering without succeeding, it is so someone who follows may enjoy success."
It's so good to be here with you today again. Excuse me, my briefcase keeps falling over. It's so good to be here with you today. I'll tell you what, it's a blessing to be here. I'm going to show you something that's really amazing. You're not even going to believe this. I brought with me today the man in my church who's memorized more scripture than anybody at Bucky Baptist Church. I brought my choir with me today. And we have a little presentation I think is going to be a real blessing to your heart. Sit back and enjoy this. You're going to really like this.
Okay, now it's important that you look at your Bible and don't look at me at all. Don't look at me at all. Don't pay any attention to me, but make sure that you'll look at your Bible. Jesus.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Praise ye the Lord.
Oh, that was powerful. Oh. That really was moving. That moved me, I'll tell you. I'll tell you what, I've been in some powerful services before. And this was not one of them, I'll tell you. I thought I'd share with you a little bit about Bucky's childhood. You know, I had a rough childhood. I was raised by my mother. My father died when I was 8, and at least that's what he told me when I talked to him on the phone. I got expelled from correspondence school. I got expelled from correspondence school for playing hooky. I kept sending back empty envelopes. You know, when I was a kid, though, every summer my parents would send me to spend the summer with my grandparents. Boy, it got cold on those summer nights in the cemetery. Well, I grew up and I got into the ministry, and when I started in the ministry, I kind of had a negative outlook on things. I really didn't think I'd make it in the ministry, but after studying Norman Vincent Peale, I have a more positive outlook on it now. I'm positive I can't make it in the ministry. Brother Cunningham has the same problem. You know, when I first started in the ministry, I had a terrible time preparing my sermons, and then I realized I was highlighting the verses with black marker. Brother Hyles, I try to do everything just like him, and he said he never takes a 30-minute period of his life without thinking about his wife, so I started doing that. You'll get that next week, all right? Really, my wife, she's just as beautiful as when I married her 20 years ago. Now it takes a little longer, though. I'm in trouble, fellas. Somebody better help me real quick. You know, somebody said to me, they said, "What'd you get your wife for Christmas last year?" I said, "Well, I got her a cemetery plot." And "What'd you get her this year?" I said, "Nothing. She didn't use the gift I gave her last year." You know, at the Bucky Baptist Church, we have a fella that's so big, one time he fell over and he didn't even know it. His son was so big, we let him play Bethlehem in the Christmas play. But that fellow was so big, he could pinch an inch on his forehead. I have a woman in my church, she's so big, she can kickstart a 747. Well, I like to bring you just a few new versions of the Bible every time I come and help you out in your ministries here. I've developed a new one for the rescue mission. It's my rescue mission Bible. All the verses that refer to wine are highlighted. I've also got a couple other Bibles here that I'd like to get for you here. I have the Queen James Version for pussyfooter preachers here. What's wrong with the old pink book my mama used to preach from? I brought this to give to Brother Hyles today. I've also have a new version of the Bible here that I'd like to give to you here. It's the amplified version of the Bible here. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was out, form and void. For people who are hard of seeing. They'll be on sale afterwards. I like to just leave you with one little word of advice, though, before I leave today. Always remember this. If you can't make fun of yourself, make fun of others. God bless you.
I'd like to speak to you again about another great American. When most historians talk about this American and they talk about him making a public profession of faith, most would say it occurred about the time that his wife died. He was extremely devoted to his wife, loved his wife, and this is a little hint. If you said anything bad about his wife, he pretty much had something to contest with you with. But he loved his wife dearly, and his wife was a godly woman, and she was one who went to church regularly, studied her Bible, and read her Bible and such. But at the point of her death, she made him promise that he would join a church and that he would also make a public profession of faith. And so at the point of her death, that's exactly what he did. Now, he would write later in his writings that he had long before had been a believer, and that he himself over 35 years had said that he was reading Scripture and would try to read through the Bible at least once a year, and was reading anywhere from 3 to 5 chapters a day. And so he said all along he had been a believer. There's a good story of this great American and Peter Cartwright. One Sunday afternoon for lunch, he invited Peter Cartwright over. And there happened to be this young lawyer sitting across from Peter Cartwright. And this young lawyer looked at Peter Cartwright and said to him, he said, "Sir, do you believe there's really such a place as hell, a place of torment?" And Peter Cartwright said, "Yes, sir, I do." And the young lawyer, full of himself, started laughing and heckling Peter Cartwright. And he said, "Well, I thank God that I'm smart enough and have sense enough to know there's no such place as hell." And by this time, Andrew Jackson looked at him and said, "I thank God there's a hell." And this young lawyer was taken back, and he said, "Well, Mr. Jackson," he said, "why do you want such a place as hell?" He said, "To have a place to send such young fools as yourself who vilify the Christian faith." I had to clean that up just a little bit, but he also made a good statement concerning the Bible. He said that book, sir, is the rock upon which our republic was built. And if you have any questions as to whether or not the man was saved, let's let him speak like a good biography should do. The Bible is true. Upon that sacred volume I rest my hope of eternal salvation through the merits of our blessed Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That's him talking. I'm not paraphrasing this. First, this is the first thing in his will. First, I bequeath my body to the dust whence it comes, and my soul to the God who gave it, hoping for a happy immortality through the atoning merits of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world.
Now, another look at the old Jack Hyles. Last year, we had the young Jack Hyles, and our baby girl, Cindy Scott, is going to come and teach the next lesson. Cindy is the wife of Dr. Jack Scott, mother of 2 lovely children. She teaches at Hyles Anderson College. She's the author of how many books now? 3 books. And Nick, I'll tell them what you're doing. I've had 14 people in the last 2 or 3 years. And many of them were excellent authors to ask if they could write my biography. And I've chosen to let Cindy write her dad's biography. She's my pal, my buddy. I'm proud of her. I love her. And we are mighty close as a father and daughter. She's going to talk to you on the old Jack Hyles, the father.
Thank you. It's really a great honor for me to be able to stand here and tell you about my father. I want to give you many ideas this afternoon about being a father, about being a preacher father, and about being the father of preachers' kids. Before I give you many ideas, I'd like to give you 2 words. I'm not too smart, and I learn best very simply. So I want to give you 2 words that describe my father's role in my life, and then I want to give you many ideas about how my father did that for me. Those 2 words are pull and push. The first thing that my father did was he pulled me towards him. And I believe that a parent cannot pull their children too closely to them. If ever a daughter was close to a father, it was me. My father and I were just like this. We were very, very close. He pulled me very close to him, and I remember my first memory of feeling close to my father was when I was a very little girl, and I was sitting on his lap, and I looked up in his eyes, and he was crying. Now, maybe you've seen him cry when he preaches. I saw him crying, and I looked, and I knew something in my heart when I looked at him that day. I knew that my father was crying for me. I knew that he was not crying for himself, he was crying for me. And he looked at me and he said, "Cindy, I just want you to be happy." And my heart left my body that day, and I gave it away to Dr. Jack Hyles. And he began to pull me towards him. The first way that he pulled me towards him was that I remember, and I'm telling you today what worked for me, was with praise, through praise. Some of you have read this story in my book, A Wife's Purpose, but when I was a little girl, I was the kind of little girl who I never really liked to comb my hair because that tied you down. You know, that wasn't very fun. I started liking to comb my hair, I think, when I started college. I never really knew where my homework was. And, you know, because my room looked like World War III had been fought in it half the time, and supper usually ended up on my lap. But my father saw in me, my head was usually in the clouds. I loved to think, but I wasn't usually thinking about what I was supposed to be thinking about. And my father recognized in me a good quality in that. And one day I wrote a story, and I gave it to my father. And my father sent me a typed written letter. And it said, "Dear Cindy," I was 8 years old. It said, "Dear Cindy, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you not only because you think deeply, but because you write your thoughts on paper." Now, a funny thing about human beings is we believe the good things that people tell us. We usually do not believe the bad things they tell us, but most often we believe the good things they tell us. And so I read that letter, and I thought to myself at the age of 8 years old, I am a very deep thinker. Now, I have had 2 8-year-old children living in my home, and now I realize how deep 8-year-olds really are. But at the time, a very skilled artist called Dr. Jack Hyles took a brush, and with a brush of words, he painted for me a picture. And I began to look at that picture and try to look like it, and try to act like it. And after that, I always thought very deeply. I still lost my homework, probably more, but I always thought very deeply, and I always wrote down what I thought on paper. I have stacks and stacks of poems at home that I wrote when I was a child, and I would share them with you, but I can't find them. But the first suggestion that I have to you is praise your children's talents. Find a source of identity for them. I was not the beautiful blonde Beverly Hyles, though she was my perfect role model. I could not play the piano like my other 2 sisters. I was not tall and blonde and beautiful like my mother and my sister, who is 2 years older than I am. But my father gave me a source of identity. Number 2, make your children feel that they are what you want them to become. My father made me feel that I was deep. I was not deep, but he made me feel that I already was, and that helped me to think. Also, apprentice your children for the ministry. something else that my father used to say to me. He used to say, you know, Cindy, I love very deeply. And he used to say this to all of our family. But I remember him saying it to me, I love very deeply. And when I go out and preach somewhere, I don't feel like very many of the people love me as much as I love them. But he said, when I come home and I talk to you, Cindy, I feel like I'm talking to someone who loves me as much as I love them. And I feel that I'm talking to someone who can philosophize with me. Again, I was just a little girl. But I feel like I'm talking to somebody who can philosophize with me and understand me. And so I thought, well, good night. I have got an important job here. I'm the only person deep enough to philosophize with him, so I have to be home a lot. And I have to stay up at night, because when my dad gets home, you know, he's going to need me there to philosophize with, because those preachers, they don't know how to philosophize like I do, and I've got to be there. And you know that's not the truth, but I believed it. And I had a mission. I was kind of like Barney Fife. I took my mission a little too seriously sometimes. But I had a mission. And my mission was, and I say this, I've been teasing but in a way, but I say this very seriously. My father's mission was to save America, to preserve America for the next generation. And my mission was to encourage my father. And to this day, I never say the Pledge of Allegiance. I never sing the Star-Spangled Banner without crying, even if I'm at a basketball game and my son's playing and I really want him to win. I never sing it without crying, because from the time I was a very little girl, I had a mission. I was given a cause. I was given a purpose. And I was pulled closer and closer to my father. The second thing that pulled me toward my father, other than praise, was compassion. Some ideas under that. Don't act like your children's failures are a source of embarrassment to you. I made a big mistake when I was in high school. And all my friends could say to me is, what is your dad going to say when you get home? They called my dad the man. Some of the boys in the high school called my dad the man, which that doesn't sound respectful, but I was always proud of it. My father was always and has always been a very masculine person to me, and I was always very proud of his masculinity. But they said, what is your father going to say when you get home? And I got home and I told my dad what I had done. And my dad said, and it wasn't anything immoral, but it was just stupid, real stupid. And if it had been your child, you would have been embarrassed. I had a big mouth when I was a kid. And I went home and I told my dad what I had done. And my dad said, Cindy, he said, this is the quality about you that caused you to do what you did. And it's a good quality. Now, I deserved him probably to be real hard on me. But he said, this is a good quality that you have that caused you to do what you did. And this is what you did because of your good quality that was bad. And it was stupid. What you did was stupid, but you did it because you had this good quality. And, you know, I was already really angry at myself for my mistake. And once again, my father saved face for me. Once again, my father painted a picture for me, and I tried to act it out. Number 2, when your children fail, point out to them the asset of their particular personality traits. Number 3, do not tell your children how busy you are. Always, when I would knock on my father's office door, I knocked like this. Now that means it's me. And when I was a teenager, I just loved to barge down the office and knock on the door. And sometimes my dad would come to the door and he always said, hi, Puddin'. I'm in a meeting right now. What can I do for you? And I'd say, oh, that's okay. I don't need to bother you, especially as I got older and a little wiser. You're in a meeting. That's okay, Puddin'. What can I do for you? He never came home and told us how busy he was. He may have come home and said, like if he'd come home from pastor school, he would not say, oh, I stayed in the nicest hotel. I had so much fun. It was so good to get away. Oh, it was just wonderful. He would come in and he would say, I think perhaps America was saved today, this week. Or maybe we got some more preachers on fire, but I really missed you. And you know, I wouldn't have gone if I hadn't wanted to do something to help our country and to help you. That was the kind of things that he would say to me. I knew he was busy when he said that to me. but I did not feel that I was the cause of his busyness and that he had no time for me. The next point, be kinder to your own family than you are to your own church members. I am not talking about me. See, something that my dad has always did for me growing up is he made me feel very significant, very important. And you know, preachers' children and the children of successful people naturally have a tendency to feel insignificant. We know we were just born into the right family. We know we just got quote unquote lucky. And it's very important for pastors to make their children feel significant. Sometimes children come to me and I don't give them much sympathy. I don't like to listen to children criticize their parents, and I don't listen very much or very long. But when sometimes pastors' children come to me and they say, you know, my dad is nice to everybody in the church except my mom or the children or me. And that grieves me, because I know that they need you in a very special way to treat them more special than your church members. The rough thing is when you get home, you want to take your shirt off and lay on the couch and let your guard down. But when you get home, you got to put your best foot forward. Because even though I realize when you're a preacher, your ministry is not your children, still, they need you. They need you to make them feel significant. I felt so significant to my dad. He created in me such a need. This is true of all the children. I felt so needed by my dad. I remember one time when I was a teenager, my mother said Dad would be late because he had a flat tire. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to go to him. He's got a flat tire. And then I stopped and I thought, that's stupid. He is pastor of the largest church in the world. He can handle a flat tire. But I just thought that I had to help him through everything. You know, we all had to help Dad through everything. Dad helped America, we helped Dad, you know. And, but that's how significant. And all this time, this person who thought I had to help this man save America couldn't find her homework, remember. But I just had been made to feel very significant and very important. And all this time I was being pulled closer and closer and closer to my father. And I was learning about encouraging a man. I was learning about the ministry. Not that I've used everything successfully that I've learned, but I was learning a lot. He pulled me towards him with compassion. He pulled me towards him with fun. He related to me, and that's a real key word in rearing children. He always has told me, relate. He related to me. Under that, have a pet name for your children. My dad would say to me, he called me his buddy when he introduced me, and that is one of his pet names. When I was a little girl, he'd say, what are we again? I forgot what we are. And I'd say, buddies. And he'd say, that's right, we're buddies, and we're always going to be buddies, aren't we? And I said, we're always going to be buddies. And a few minutes later, he'd say, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't remember. I forgot what we are again. What are we? I'd say, buddies. And he said, and we're always going to be buddies, aren't we? I said, we'll always be buddies. Don't bring your burdens home. Children don't relate to spirituality very much, small children. Probably if you called your children and said, we had such a wonderful service last night, a man quoted the whole book of Revelation, they would say, that's what you do to have fun? Now, I had a lot of fun last night, but I'm no lady now. But when I was a little girl, my dad did not come home and quote the book of Revelation to us. Most of the time, he came home and he acted pretty silly. My mother was always trying to get us not to be silly, and my father was always part of the problem and not part of the solution. And I've often said that my father never raised his voice at home, and that is the truth. I had thought it was the truth, but I got to thinking about it, and I thought, no, he did raise his voice at home, because when he laughs very, very loud. And I always loved that about my father. I can hear him laughing from a mile away. Have dates with your children. I remember milkshakes. I remember many dressing, times to shop for dresses. I remember many times to the park. We had dates together. You don't have to attend all of your children's activities to make them feel loved. I remember, as if it were yesterday, sitting cheering as a cheerleader at a basketball game and thinking, my dad's not here, and my dad's hardly ever here. But I don't think any of the other dads of my friends stay up till midnight at the kitchen table and talk to them when they're in town. I don't think any other dad sit up and philosophize with our family like my dad when he does when he's home. You always find the time to do what is important to you. And if you think that because Dr. Hyles traveled a lot and was very busy that I did not have a father, you are very wrong. I very much had a father. I had as much of a father as any girl ever had. And the same is true of my two sisters and my brother. He pulled me towards him through security. Make your children feel that you are masculine. My mother is a very, very feminine lady, and my father is a very, very masculine man, and the lines were never blurry between them. Make your children feel that you will meet every need. My dad used to say, I don't care what I have to do. If things got tight financially, he'd say, I don't care what I have to do, I'll take care of you. Well, you'll be cared for. I don't care what I have to do. I don't care if, you'll be cared for. He pulled me towards him through security. He pulled me towards him through spirituality. Be consistent with your standards. If you said to me, what was it that your dad did at home, the thing he did that wasn't consistent with his preaching? If there was something, I would not tell you, because I don't believe in talking about the weaknesses of parents. But there isn't anything. My father was 100% consistent at home. Be careful not to criticize authority. Bring God and fun together. My dad taught me that there's two types of wrong parents, spooky parents and worldly parents. Spooky parents are so spiritual, they're of no childish good. And worldly parents are only spiritual on Sunday and only believe about 75% of what the preacher preaches. They only practice about 75% of what the preacher preaches. And my father was neither one of these things. Now, this is the wonderful father that I had and that I have. And when we were just this close, along came a young man named Jack Scott. And I knew right away that this was the man I was supposed to marry. Well, I chose to marry Jack Scott, and while I was engaged, every week my dad sat down made an appointment with me and talked to me about how to be a good wife. I am not a good wife, but I have been very, very well trained. And the first year of my marriage then, after I was this close to my father, I married Jack Scott, and my father started to push. He had been pulling until we were so, so close. We'd never been so close. And then I married Jack Scott, and he pushed me away. And for the first year of my marriage, I almost never saw my father. I'm not saying you have to be that strict, but I thought, where is he? He had to be that strict. I miss him. I thought I'd be real, real close to Jack Scott and real, real close to Dr. Hyles, and we'd all be happy, live happily ever after. And my dad said, no, that won't work. He didn't say that, but through his behavior, he said, that won't work. It's time for you now to take all this feeling that you have for me and give it to somebody else. And I looked around, and the greatest father in the world was not there. And so all of this love I began to give to the greatest husband in the world. And the older I get, the more I realize that the most loving thing that my father did was to push me away. And so gradually, we have begun to build a new relationship as married father, a married daughter, and my married father. My mom and my dad have lived happily ever after without me, and it hurts my feelings sometimes, But then I think, well, Brother Scott and I have done pretty well without them too, so we're doing okay. But in our married life then, my parents began to go through one of the worst struggles in their life. And all this time, my father kept telling me, every time he'd tell me he wanted me to do something different than the way I was doing it, he would say, I just want you to be happy. He said that to me 1,000 times. I just want you to be happy. Now, he under his breath, he was saying that means you can never enter a movie theater, never listen to rock music, never wear pants. You must go soul winning every week. You should help others. But he didn't say that a lot at home. He just would say, I just want you to be happy. And I kept finding out that his way was the happy way. And then we began to go through some struggles in our family. Not in our family, but around us, we began to go through some struggle. Began to receive criticism. And I went through that struggle with my husband, and I went through that struggle with my parents. And when we came through that struggle, I looked at the other side of the struggle and I said, oh, here's joy. I'm happy. I'm real glad when I was sitting on his lap and he told me he wanted me to be happy when I was a little girl, that he didn't tell me that I would have to struggle, because I would have said, well, just go ahead and let me be miserable then. But at the other side of the struggle, there was joy, and I truly was happy. And in closing, I want to say this now. Now the baby girl of Jack Hyles is a middle-aged lady. Well, don't tell him that, because he still thinks I'm young, and I still think he's middle-aged. So, but now I'm a middle-aged lady, and I'm rearing 2 children. And I'm hoping that there are some more great fathers in this room. I have noticed in my life, as a preacher's daughter, though I'm not near as smart as any of you preachers, that the thing that has made me so happy, the thing that my father has done to make me so happy, is to choose high standards and to choose a high zeal as far as soul-winning philosophy is concerned. And I've noticed that there's always a high road, and there's always a low road, and there's always a middle of the road. And the middle of the roaders are always the most critical of the people who choose the high road. But I have noticed in the high road that there is that joy that my father always wanted me to have. And I want my children to have that same joy. They're 14 and 11. And I want to rear them to learn how to be happy. I have been taught in any situation how to be happy. And that's exactly what I want for my children. I want them to be able to go through whatever struggle they need to go through and find joy. And they will only find joy if there are preachers who will choose the high road and not the middle of the road, not the complacent, laissez-faire, bored life. Lukewarm, as that guy last night said it, only he said it a different way. But it is my prayer, and it is my hope that I have been able to show you today that Dr. Jack Hyles is and was and always has been, since he's had children, a great father. And it is my hope that there are some other great fathers in here. To me, a great father is someone who cares about the joy of his children more than he cares about his own joy. And I'm hoping that there's somebody's in here who care more about the joy of the next generation than you do about your own joy. Now my father is ending his life. He'll live a lot longer, but you know how he talks. But he's dedicated the rest of his life to preserve the King James Bible. And I think, as a proud daughter, what better way, what kinder thing to do for the next generation than to be sure that they have a Bible that is intact. And I have never been more proud of my father. I have never felt more loved. And because he's always made me feel so important in some strange way, I think he's doing it just for me and for mine. Now, I know he's doing it for all of you, but I am very proud of my father, and he has reached his goal. He always reaches his goal, and I am very, very happy. Thank you very much.